A senior economist at the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives is sounding the alarm on federal housing and dental benefits. David Macdonald says atrocious take-up is the reason that hundreds of thousands of Canadians missed out on the federal benefits. His analysis assessed how much the government actually spent on both measures. Mr. Macdonald says only 44% of those who would have likely been eligible for the one-time top-up to the Canada Housing Benefit actually received them. This while just over half have received the Canada dental benefit. He says lessons should be learned from this so that the next time around, programs like these have higher take-up rates. Well, joining us now to give us more insight into this research is Mr. David Macdonald himself. Sir, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Sure thing. Well, thanks for having me.
So what were found to be the main reasons behind these, as you call them, atrociously low take-up rates in terms of the Canada Housing and Dental benefits?
Well, these are the second version, really, of benefits that we tried out during the pandemic. Things like CERB, for instance, where you'd go to the CRA website, attest that you met the criteria, and money would show up in your account 2 days later. These are other approaches to that, but they have skewed further away from attestation and more towards assuming that everyone who is applying fraudulently and has to provide all the documentation up front. That was certainly the case with the Canada Housing Benefit, which I think really made it pretty sure that only about a third of the money that they had allocated would actually get out the door. The other thing, too, I think, is one of advertising. Certainly during the pandemic, people were well aware of the existence of CERB, but the Canada Housing Benefit suffered from an advertising deficit. Not only was it confusing in that it took the name of another program that was unrelated in essence, but the CRA already knows, in many cases, who is likely eligible for these benefits, but did nothing to email them directly or message them directly through their My Account platform, which they use during tax time for other purposes.
And on top of that, you highlighted some invasive measures compared to what was required for CERB payments. So in what ways could the application process through the CRA have been improved?
Well, certainly for the Canada Housing Benefit, one of the big issues was that you actually had to get a letter from your landlord in order to apply. And so what that would mean is that potentially you're indicating to your landlord that your income is low and that you can't make the rent. And maybe your landlord isn't going to provide you with that letter. And so as a result of these extra steps that had to be done up front, it wasn't something that, you could request after the fact. It's going to be harder for people to apply and potentially make it less likely that people are going to apply.
All right, and we know this low take-up means that the federal government has spent less than what was actually allocated for these programs. So what do we know about how much was actually spent by officials compared to what was allocated?
Well, in terms of the Canada Housing Benefit, they initially planned to spend 1.2 billion on the program. They only spent about 400 million. And so only about a third of the money they thought they were going to spend was actually spent. And that program is over. So the Canada Housing Benefit has ended at the end of March. Now, the Canada Dental Benefit continues. The first round of those benefits ends at the end of June, which you can still apply for. And then there'll be a second round following June through the end of 2023. So that's not as much a bad news story there. In terms of the amount dispersed by March, this is really the first checkpoint of how that program is going. They figured that they would disperse about 350 million. They've only dispersed about 160 million. So a little under half of what they thought they'd disperse at this point. But there's hope on that program because people can still apply for it. And so hopefully as part of this analysis, the CRA can attempt various other approaches to boost the take-up of the dental benefit, because there's a lot of families who could certainly use it if they've got costs for their children to receive dental care and they don't have insurance. But the take-up rates are just far lower than they really should be.
So what do we know about what's going to happen to the leftover funding for the housing benefit?
Well, there's no plans for it at present. This money will just go back into the budget and pay down the deficit in essence. It's certainly true that we could have potentially another round. It's not like housing prices are going down or rental costs are going down. Rents actually hit an all-time high in terms of price inflation over the course of the fall, and they're not going down anytime soon. With high interest rates, we're going to continue to see high rental rate increases as interest rates push up the cost for landlords. And so there's potentially an argument to take the 2/3 of the money that was going to be spent on this benefit and try again and try to do better the second time around. I do think that these benefits have promise for the future. It's a way to really get money into people's hands very quickly outside of filing for taxes, which is the old way of how we would get money to people through income transfer programs. And so, it's unfortunate that the second round went poorly, but I don't think that's a reason to throw the entire program out. And so we'll see whether this money is repurposed for something else.
We'll have to see indeed. All right, Mr. Macdonald, thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily.
Sure thing. Thanks for having me.